So in this video, I'm going to walk you through how to factor a trinomial using the AC method. And we call it the AC method because we take the value of A times the value of C. And A and C are the coefficients that you see here when it's in descending order. So when it's in descending order, the coefficient that comes first would be A, the middle coefficient would be B, and then the last coefficient would be C. So what we do is once we take that A times that C, in this case we would get negative 420 because I would take 14 times a negative 30. And then from there we want to find factors of negative 420 that when I multiply I get negative 420, but when I add it I get the value of B, and in this case that would be 23. So because this is a negative 420, we want our factors to be 1 to be positive, 1 to be negative. So that way when we multiply it, we get a negative. And sometimes this can be a little tedious and time consuming because when you have a large number, you have a lot of combinations to check. But once you find that combination, from there, it's actually pretty easy. So after some finagling, I found that the combination I want to use is 12 and 35. One of them has to be negative though. If I take 12 times 35, that gives me 420. But one of them has to be negative so that I can multiply to get the negative 420. And I want to make sure I pick the right one to be negative because I want these to add to give me negative 23. So I'm going to pick 35 to be negative so that when I take 12 and a negative 35, I get negative 23. So once we find this combination, what we do is we use that combination to split that value of B into two terms. So I'm going to rewrite negative 23x as 12x and a minus 35x. And then I bring down the rest. So I bring down the minus 30 and I bring down the 14x squared. Now, I check to make sure this still works, right? If I add these together, I get negative 23x. So these two statements here are equivalent. Now, once I get it written so that I have four terms, and by the way, the order in which I write the 12 and the negative 35 does not matter. You'll still come out with the same answer. But once you have this written in four terms, then you can use grouping. So you're going to look at the first two terms and the last two terms, and you're going to factor those separately. So in the first two terms, I have a 2 and an x that's in common, and what would be left over is 7x plus 6. Now my factors, that's inside the parentheses, those two factors have to be the same. So I'm going to write 7x plus 6 here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out what goes in front of the 7x plus 6 so that I get the last two terms, negative 35x minus 30. Well, that would have to be a minus 5, and you can check it. If I take negative 5 times 7x, that gives me a negative 35, and I take negative 5 times a positive 6, I get a negative 30, so that works. So now that we have this factored where I have a 7x plus 6 in common, this term is in common. I have that the same, so I'm going to pull that out. And then what's left over is 2x minus 5. So that's what's left over that goes inside the parentheses. And now this is completely factored. And you can always FOIL it and multiply it back out to check to make sure you get the right answer. If you FOIL that and you get 14x squared minus 23